Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jashed. Today I'm very excited to have with me my good friend Stacy Barnes. Stacy is a financial advisor who helps professional and private clients to better understand their financial position through the use of self-managed super funds, compliance and financial audits, and financial education. So Stace has a background as an SMSF manager, audit director, and retirement and investment advisor. And is now director of NextGen Advisory, where her values around freshening up the perspective of financial advice, communicating clearly, and building a relationship of mutual trust and respect really get to be on display. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. You made me sound pretty boring. No.
Hey. No, I think it's impressive because it's all that stuff which is exactly what we're going to talk about, that I'm like, this is so out of my field of expertise. So thank God that she has these values around that. So I wanted to talk first about, because your values are so strong in building that relationship with your clients, and it is so important to have that level of relationship where there is trust and respect. Can you share why that's important to you and maybe how you go about that?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest part of, I suppose what I enjoy most about my job is I have a pretty keen interest in anthropology and just understanding how people tick. And everybody is so different, and uncovering each little idiosyncrasy in each person is, it's interesting to me. And I suppose that interest goes further into understanding how they make decisions. And then once they kind of adopt me as their decision maker, I can then go and help them make decisions and be confident that I'm making it not only in their best interest, but, you know, as if we were there doing it together. Sometimes we are, but a lot of the time with the demographic of the clients that I deal with, they're a lot older. They're busy, they're looking after grandkids, they're, you know, green nomads, and really they need me to be autonomous in my decision making for them.
Yeah.
So understanding, I suppose, how they might make decisions helps build trust and you know, I suppose more confidence in what I'm doing with them.
Yeah, and that makes sense, like, because the reason that people might hire like services like a financial advisor is because it's not where they want to have their energy and attention, so they kind of like delegate it to you. But I got this vision of you this being this little financial fairy godmother coming in.
Yeah, I suppose so.
When you talk to your clients, because you've mentioned before that, you know, there's different levels of financial literacy or understanding and all of that can come in with different people, also with couples, depending on who's the real chief decision maker in the partnership and who takes care of the money typically, or who kind of has been left out of it.
Yep.
How do you find that level of communication, because you're changing that different level of communication with each client, I imagine, because it's so unique for each client's needs? What are the challenges there for you?
It's actually really quite difficult when you've got different levels of financial aptitude and also interest. Some parties just really aren't interested in talking about it at all. It's like, you know, he does it or she does it. I'm not really interested. I'm just here, which is hard when you're putting it all into explaining something and someone really doesn't care, but it's genuinely, you know. I think it all comes down to just meeting the client to start with and understanding what they really want from you, because sometimes they don't actually really want to be educated. They actually just want some guidance. They want you to make decisions for them. And really it's just about listening to them. Clients don't come to me for no reason. They come to me because they've got financial goals there's a purpose or a reason for me, whether it is now or in the future. Like, for example, last week I had an interview with a guy he's about 80. He's had some heart problems. He's always managed the finances. He's actually an accountant. And he knows that when he drops off, which will be before his wife, who's 10 years younger, that he needs someone to step into his shoes and help. So last week I had a meeting with him, and then a coffee with her on her own so she could, suss me out and see if she wanted to work with me. So my interview with him was very different to my interview with her. So with him, it was more analytical. This is how I do the books. This is what I kind of want. This is our investment strategy. This is how I do things. And, and my interview with the wife was more like, it was more like a date. It was like, does she like me? Does
Yeah.
she want a relationship with me for the next perhaps 20 years? Because she's a lot younger than him. Am I going to be her go-to? Can she trust me? Do I like traveling? Do I have kids? Do we share anything in common? How do I think? So the interview is very different between the two parties. And if you can imagine trying to put them in the same room together and both of them, it's actually quite difficult. It can be done, but I mean, you're switching to and fro and yeah.
Well, you're getting variety, and you're definitely getting variety in the kinds of meetings you have, at least, but yeah, I imagine that there is that difference in, like, you're tapping into the needs of the people, like the needs of individuals, and what she needed was more of that, probably that emotional connection, really, because for whatever reason, but like she needed that emotional connection, so that's what the conversation was about. It wasn't so much about the analytical, especially as someone who was also an accountant.
Yeah.
Right? That would have been super analytical, because you could have just been like, yep, great, this.
And to be perfectly honest, the way you relate to those two people to gain trust is completely different. The commonalities that you have to find are completely different things. And I've found over the years, I'm pretty good at nonverbal, like picking up nonverbal cues. And that, I suppose we can go back to why that is. And that has a lot to do with the way I was raised, I suppose. So I have migrant grandparents and a migrant parent, but I've got Italians and Austrians. So, and I was raised pretty much like I was raised in a village. So I was,
and that's big family energy, both of those. Like, that's
big families, a lot of friends around, country town. So I was always around a lot of adults, and I was a lot of different cultures, religions, everything. And the biggest thing about the Italians is they could be out the front of the house talking about the weather with the neighbors in Italian, and you'd think they're going to go into a full-blown argument. You can definitely misconstrue it. And then on the other side, the Austrians, very reserved people. It's a very fine line between whether they're mad with you or whether they're, looking at you with admiration. They don't display a lot.
Yeah.
So I think that being able to pick up nonverbal cues really puts me into kind of where I need to be in a meeting, whether I need to shut up and sit back and listen more, or whether I need to bring more energy, or even if I need to. Sometimes we don't even touch on anything that's analytical in nature, or anything on how the wheel was invented. We don't even talk about that at all. Sometimes we just talk about the way they might feel, the way they like to invest, and if they like me, we go from there. But I have worked out with the non-verbal cues pretty much straight away if we're going to get along. And I suppose you could put that down to a little bit of intuition as well. But I've found that in my younger years, like when I first started doing it, I used to get those cues, but I still used to push it and try harder.
Yes. Yep.
You know what I mean? And it never worked out well. So I think catching those emotions quickly has saved me a lot of time and energy, and being pretty switched on about whether I am engaging. We engage each other. We work together. We're a team.
Yeah. There's a coach that I've done some work with, and he talks about like try, test, and trust your intuition. So like sometimes, because if you're not really sure where it's coming from, and when you're in the habit of pushing it just to see, right? And I know that feeling as well, very well. But like, you kind of like either you kind of test it by like going, oh, I might just trust it this time and see what happens.
Yeah.
Or I might trust it in the affirmative of what it's saying I should do, even if I want to push it. Like I might trust it and be like, okay, I'll just sit back and listen and see what happens. And it sounds like you've found that natural process of doing all of that just as part of your relating to other people as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I do always say in interviews, let's get to know each other, because you might not like me and I might not like you.
Yeah.
So it is a very mutual, I feel like you have to have confidence in what you offer in your specialty. People put a lot of time into their careers and effort and years and pride. And it's not just a one-sided relationship, whereas, I'm paying you, so, you respect me. It's not that. There has to be mutual respect involved, or else you have more of a tendency to make mistakes because you become nervous or something along the lines.
Yeah, there's a little bit of like a lackluster kind of feeling about doing that work and carrying out that work when you're not fully in it, right?
It's a really good point too. I think to enjoy what you do, you have to enjoy. It has to be rewarding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you have good outcomes for people, that's the reward. You solve a problem for them. And I suppose the ultimate reward is when someone trusts you wholeheartedly. You
Yeah,
can't do much better than that.
yeah, definitely.
Something as sensitive as money and I mean, I talk a lot about death and estate planning and things like that. Very unordinary conversations for, to be having. Mortality is basically all I talk about some days.
Yeah. Do you find that some of those conversations get a little sensitive, or do you feel into it in the same way? Or
I feel like when people come to speak to me about it, we touch on it the first meeting and we won't go into it. So we might say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about, maybe not the first meeting, but as our relationship gets, people, it's interesting. Some people are very aware of their mortality and some people choose to ignore it until it's too late and we can't make any changes or anything that could have improved their position, whether it be taxation or whatever. So I think the best way to approach that is to make people feel comfortable. You can make kind of jokes about death. You can use slang like when you kick the bucket, or, as soon as you're out, we're buying a Porsche with this money anyway, or, so there's little things we can do to make people feel comfortable.
yeah.
But yeah, it is a, and again, I think my interest in the way that people react and things like that kind of does help with those conversations. I'm interested.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Do you think that there's a difference in how people perceive that kind of conversation culturally, just in your experience of, like you said, being raised by that village of multiculturalism and...
Yes, there is actually. So the Italians take death pretty seriously. It's probably not something, I probably wouldn't have a lighthearted joke about death with Italians.
It's very reverent, isn't it? Like there's a lot of
religion around it as well.
Yeah.
Which is another thing. At the end of the day, you just kind of steer those conversations more into the outcomes for the survivors and what that might mean, and how we can make it, the easiest transition, because at the end of the day, everyone's going to be grieving. So we basically, it really, yeah, it's hard. It's an art. It's not a science. So
yeah, but that's why we're having this conversation, because it is like, especially there's two things, like I feel like you tackle the two hardest things that people don't want to talk about, bar politics, right? There's death and money.
Yeah.
Like there's the two things that can be really triggering for people.
Yeah. And I actually feel quite humbled that I get the opportunity to deal with those things with people, to be honest, that because not everyone wants to talk about it either. Not everyone wants to give advice on it. Not everyone's comfortable with it.
Yeah, it can feel intimidating, I imagine.
Yeah, I suppose.
But not for you.
Well, that's the problem. I have to always bring myself back to the fact that I talk about it every day. So I have to realize that, because I am extremely comfortable with my mortality to the point where it's just, it's actually not something that, I'm afraid of or whatever. So I have to make sure that I remove my personal what's ingrained in me and my beliefs when I'm speaking to someone, because that has nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, that definitely does. I think that's part of any kind of communication, is when we're learning to connect and build relationships with others. It's the balance of standing in our own beliefs, but also not bringing them into that relationship building,
Yep.
especially in a professional service as well.
Absolutely.
Mm. Do you find that there is a different response from different people as far as age groups? So you said you work mostly with like
Yeah.
old age groups and everything like that, and I know you may not have as much to draw on from the younger, but you would have the awareness of.
Well, I do write life insurance, which is for younger people. They have an innate, well, I can't paint everyone with the same brush, but I got to say that people think they're going to live forever, and they think that they're never going to get sick, and they think they're never going to get injured, and they do think that they're bulletproof. But the scariest part about that is that's just not realistic, because some people are only a month away from losing their house and their home, and all these things can be prevented with certain covers. Also, it's not fair to sell things based on fear, so people have to come to a certain realization of reality on their own, and make decisions, I suppose, about this. The only time, so what normally happens is someone gets sick around them, or they lose a friend, or a friend gets sick. Some big trigger event occurs where people take a step back and start to think, holy shit, this could happen to me. I probably should do something about it, seeing as though I'm the sole breadwinner and I've got a few kids running around. Older people are really philosophical. I really enjoy talking death with, I know it sounds sick, but I really enjoy talking death with older people. I get to hear some stories of, what they might think the afterlife is like. And I get to hear some stories about, they're just more realistic in a sense. And it's refreshing, I suppose. That it's just, to me, it's something that is just so natural, and I suppose I kind of embody that more so.
Yeah, it's a different, it sounds like it's a different, entirely different conversation, as far as like you get to dive into those more, I was going to say playful, I don't know if that's the right word for this context, but like the more playful ideas around what you do, like what happens with death. So, like the imaginings of the afterlife and all of that, right? But like for the younger crew,
making it more palatable does help with talking about it, so people are getting comfortable about it. I will say there is some very serious matters that revolve around estate planning and death as well. You deal with people that might want to cut certain people out of their wills for whatever reasons, or move money away from, people don't have straightforward lives. People sometimes have more than one relationship. People have some really interesting pasts and things that they want to resolve before they go. And sometimes estate planning, we do that. And to be able to voice these things requires a very comfortable setting.
Yeah, comfortable, like,
and non-judgmental as well.
Yeah, and nuance as well to the conversation, rather than just diving in and going like this. You have to be nuanced in how you approach it, and the words you choose, depending on the person, depending on what's going on.
I'm just an instrument, right? So you tell me what you want, and you have to be honest with me, and then I will do my best to make sure it's what you want. That's all I am.
Yeah, it's it's just there's so many details to how you in your role have to approach all of these different conversations, because there's so many details to the different conversations beyond just the details of what they want. It's actually like the details, like you said, of the history, of the current circumstances, of the culture, of the perceptions around those each different topics, whether it's death or in the future, even like what they want to do with the future and how that looks. Like there's so much to work.
Unpack.
Yeah, to unpack.
It doesn't
Exactly.
end either. It doesn't end.
Mm.
So, you know, I can have relationships with people for years and years and years, and I'm still learning about them. Like it doesn't end. It's great.
I feel like that's a good, like, it's a good reflection of what relationships of any kind are, though. Like, you know, we are always learning about people, no matter how long we know them and everything, because everyone's still growing and changing and shifting. So it's, I think that's just a good point, like pointing out or highlighting that it's a good lesson to, it's a good thing to practice actively trying to connect with people and communicate rather than just staying stuck in your own ways. And it does sound like you balance that really well, because you're constantly and consciously trying to find the different ways that connect with them.
Yeah. And I suppose the industry has a reputation of, it's not that at all, right?
Oh, it's, yeah, that's
If
not
you
the reputation at all. Yeah.
and I mean, if you think of, you know, your financial planners and your royal commissions and that, it's probably hard for people to believe that, you know, sometimes my clients ring me just to ask me how my kid is, and you know, then we might talk about, you know, how the investments are going or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's what our relationship, we are the first people that get called if someone's to pass away. You know, you call the solicitor and then you call the advisor, because we know where everything is. So it's funny. I suppose you hear bad news more than you hear good news, right?
Yeah. It's
And
just
sifting through bad news.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like, realizing, even I feel like I'm even realizing now, and I've known you for years, like I've worked with you, like but realizing just how deep of a role financial advisors really play in people's lives and how important that connection really is, rather than just it being perceived as something that is soulless. And
And I completely agree with you. It can be soulless, and I think it is there are soulless firms out there. I'll be bold enough to say that there are people that can walk in and you can paint them with the same thing and send them away with the same thing that you gave to the last person that walked in, irrespective of, you know, you might just say, oh, you know, well, you're medium risk, so have that, goodbye. Yeah, sure. There are soulless operators. Robo advice and the new future of digital advice will very much fulfill that need. And AI can do that, but I'm a human.
Yeah, you are.
I'm a human being. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a philosophical question. Are we all really here?
Come back to that. So there's a couple of questions I like to ask each guest to close up with, just because it's a nice little self-reflection exercise, really.
Okay.
But I feel like on that note, it's also like I'm human kind of exercise. So for starters, where do you feel like you do how you communicate and connect with people really well, just in summary?
So I feel like I have an innate ability to make people feel comfortable. I think I'm a very non-judgmental person. And if someone gives me a little bit of something that's a little bit out of the box, I'll push it to make them feel comfortable, or even share something about myself or someone I know who they can relate to, and then probably attach a positive reaction to it so that, you know, we can dig deeper and deeper. I think that's probably, once people are comfortable with you and they see what you do with that information, they can start to trust you. And yeah, I think that's a really good foundation.
Yeah.
What I do.
Definitely with what you do. Like, this is everyone's precious, like, you know, life savings, or it is their life, you know, it's how it impacts their life so much. So that awareness of what you do and how you do it and on being on purpose with it is super important.
And people don't just make decisions for financial gains either. People are emotional, you know. I mean, the stock market, for example, a third of it is just driven by human emotion. It has nothing to do with numbers.
Oh yeah, it's about how people want to feel, right?
Yeah, it's how they feel. And so, you can't be a robot in this industry.
Mm. Okay, so that's what you do really well. Where do you feel like there's room for improvement in how you communicate? Like, where do you feel like you're wanting to learn or build on your skills on next?
There's a bit of a country girl stuck in me that likes to swear a little bit. I could probably do better with that. However,
I don't know if that's a problem. I feel like it's
it does
relatable.
make people feel a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
And it does show a slight sense of honesty on my behalf and vulnerability, with like willing to show. Restraint would be a bit helpful. My level of openness probably needs to. Again, it's a tool. Again, I think. I don't know, Jess. You know me. What do you think I should improve?
Hey, that's not fair. I think
I'm a perfectionist. I'm always looking to improve things.
that's it though. It's maybe okay. Now I feel put on the spot. I wonder if you are too hard on yourself in how you show up for people. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you're always looking at, oh, I could have done that better, and it's a healthy practice to have for sure when we like reflect and that sort of thing. But just having this very quick reflection back on how you do show up in how you communicate or anything, or how you build connections, is wondering if you do you hold yourself to a higher standard than others.
I'm definitely hard on myself, 100%. I think that's what makes me so good. You have to be accountable. But I take your point that not everything can be, you can only do your best, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it too, I mean, something happened today where, a stock might have fallen, and I thought about it for half the day. But, like I do invest things as if they were for people, my friends and family. So I do,
and
yeah.
I think that heart is really important in doing business, regardless of what kind of business you do, like actually caring on that level. Yeah, it was just
No, I completely agree.
yeah, it was just because also perfectionism is staying frozen, right? And the risk of, I don't know if you have this risk, because I feel like you move ahead with things, you don't let yourself stay stuck. But it's being aware of, like, knowing that you're just doing your best, and that you have really tough conversations as well, day in and day out, with all of these different kinds of people. So I don't know, that's, since you turned it around on me, that's my advice.
Good.
And one last question, it's not about you, so don't worry.
Oh, good.
Where do you feel like there's room for improvement in your industry, in communication, or how they connect with people?
That's a whole nother session.
Yeah.
Our industry is strangled by a corporate body who is completely out of touch with the real people. Their decisions they're making are blanket decisions to punish my predecessors who have already left the industry. So we need to look forward. They need innovation, and they need to look forward. Yeah, there is a lot of room to improve. And what they're doing is actually doing the opposite of encouraging trust in my industry as well, which is a shame. It's a very important industry. There's probably only about 20,000 financial planners in Australia now, and that's heading downwards pretty quickly.
Wow.
Is that
due to like that cumulative effect of the lack of trust, so less people are turning to them?
No, it actually has to do with just how difficult it is to be a financial planner. All the licensing and the costs, the regulatory costs.
Like I've watched you go through like all of these different, like jump through all of these different hoops just to make sure that you are compliant and that your skills are up to date, which is great. I mean, I'm sure your clients appreciate that, but there's a lot to it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, I've had a bachelor's degree for ever, and I'm doing my master's. So, and you have to do a certain amount of hours each. So I already have the qualifications you need, but even still, while people are catching up who didn't have them, I'm still being punished.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a complete basket case, to be honest, and it's a whole nother interview.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll take time. It's necessary for the financial health of Australians and the economy overall, that people understand how to use their money, and what to do with it. And because, you know, we've got an aging population, and we need to be able to support them. And we don't have the means without some self-funding. So yeah, it's very important.
Well, that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on and have this conversation, because it is one of those conversations that you don't necessarily get to have with ease or without being charged. Like, you know, like
I'll be sending you the bill. Like,
but like, you know, it's one of those, and it's intimidating for, you know, just everyday people to go and be like, well, how does this work? Or like, what does this mean? Like, it's almost like that day, what are we? What does this mean we are? And
that's a very good point, Jess, because of the legal costs, or the licensing costs and things like that, the break even in financial planners is really high.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of dollars in licensing a year. So the cost to access advice isn't available for the everyday person.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a big overhauls that needs to be done, perhaps even financial aid, like we have legal aid, so that people, ordinary Australians, can access advice. Yeah, there's a lot to be done. That's a good point.
So thank you. So that's why I wanted to have you on, though, because I know that you do have that focus and the value on connecting with people as they are, and communicating that and sharing with them what they need to know or what they want to know, or sometimes both, you know. So it was, I really appreciate you coming on and for your time, and just for like allowing this level of conversation to open up so people can have a better idea of what they should expect as far as communication from their financial advisor, if that's something that they value. You know, maybe they want the soulless, but I don't think people want that anymore. Like, I don't think they ever really wanted it, they just didn't realize it. So
and go in there open-minded and be honest, and, you know, look for a mutual respect and that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
It's a team thing.
Yeah, definitely. Pen down, that's it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye.